Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, please respect of the national anthem. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العظيم. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Kirar Ahmed Khan, Honorable Professors, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the day 4 of capacity building and professional development workshop. Today, our first resource person is Dr. Itzaz Farooq. Dr. Itzaz Farooq is working as Associate Professor of Engineering at the Faculty of Sustainable Design Engineering, University of Island, Canada. Dr. Farooq is a professional engineer and his research focuses on fundamental understanding and development of the state-of-art precision agricultural technologies for Eastern Canada agricultural industry. Dr. Farooq is actively working on machine vision application of multispectral and thermal imagery using drone technology, delineation of management zones for site-specific fertilization, deep learning, artificial intelligence, electromagnetic induction methods, remote sensing, and many other engineering applications. Dr. Farooq was selected as one of the top 125 researchers of Canada to receive NSERC Discovery Accelerator Supplement Research Grant. He has supervised and co-supervised a number of PhD, MSc, postdoc, and research associates. Dr. Farooq has published a large number of research articles from peer-reviewed journals, book chapters, conference proceedings, as well as he is a regular keynote speaker and invited speaker. Dr. Farooq has received various regional and national awards in recognition of his excellent contribution in research and teaching. For example, Young Engineering Award 2020, Canadian Society for Bioengineering, Scholarly Endeavour Award 2020 by University of Prince Edward Island, Faculty Association, UPEI Professional Award for Combined Achievement 2019, and Award for Engineering Excellence 2018. So Dr. Farooq is a registered professional engineer and he has secured millions of dollars of research funding from provincial and federal funding agencies. So I would request Dr. Farooq to start his presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay, Nadia Ali?
हेलो
जी आवाज आ रही है? ओके
जी सर, आवाज आ रही है आपको?
जी आ रही है।
ओके
ओके, कैन आई स्टार्ट?
सर।
All right, let's get started. Thank you very much, Dr. Ikrar Khan, for the invitation to participate in this workshop series on capacity building. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the design thinking approach. And to me, that is an innovative strategy for practical solutions. And this is since I work at the School of Sustainable Design Engineering, and this is what we do on our daily routine. And I thought it will be good to share some of those ideas and details, and to initiate and discuss this design thinking. Okay, so in this talk, what my emphasis would be on the critical thinking to solve industrial problem and community issues. I also emphasize the need on the team-based approach to solve the problems, and then also hands-on experience and learning by doing things. So this is the way to go in today's world, that and facilitate independent thought process, and interact with the clients. And those clients could be anybody around you, your industrial partners, growers, farmers, and any companies you're working with. So those are your client. And it is good to interact with them to understand and solve those problems. And then also at some point at the end of the game, we need to provide them solutions. Those solutions could be prototypes, and could be the simulations, could be strategies, could be any innovations we have done throughout this process. So what engineering design is? So to me, that is a very simple definition, that we as educators, professors, we need to prepare our young graduates and students and instill the skills and make them capable of analyzing the problems, creating solutions, think critically, and write clearly. So to me, that is the very, very simple definition for the design engineering. And now also for the design engineering, we can call that it is the method or the process of developing useful things. And those could be systems, could be product, could be processes, could be devices, by applying scientific knowledge and engineering and design skills. So that's what design thinking is all about, that think critically, have a good view of it, interact and work with your partner. In this case, that would be industry, and come up with a solution that is sustainable. So just to kind of refresh your knowledge, and so the first question I ask from wherever I gave this presentation is, what is design? Okay, to me, the design is a way of thinking. It is a plan of action to come up with something that is useful. We don't design things for the sake of designing. And we can have innovative idea that could be very, very expensive, but at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything. So then there is no usefulness of that design. So to me, that design is a strategy. It is a plan of action to come up with something that is useful. At the same time, it solves some problem. At the same time, it has some requirement. And also it compensates and accommodates for any constraints it might have. And then there is a clear difference between design and problem solving. Design is usually open-ended, creative, and iterative process, where we think critically, we try to come up with innovative ideas, and there is no limit to it. That is our imagination and thought process to come up with the innovative ideas. And then when we talk about problem solving, so the problem solving is usually a very focused and it's not open-ended. So sometimes we can say that problem solving has a definite answer where what we want to come up with. And then there could be two types mainly for the design. One are purely innovative, and then the second one is the modification to the existing design to improve the comfort, to improve the functionality of it and appearance of it. And those designs could be the modifications of the existing design. For example, those modifications, modified design, the computer in 1970s and computer today is different, but it is not a new innovation. So it is the building on the existing innovation in design and making it more faster, compatible, and easy to work with. So that is the basic definition from Engineers Canada about this design thinking and engineering design, that we as scientists, we basically integrate the knowledge of sciences, engineering, and we come up with useful things. Those are those processes and products. At the end of the day, they are serving some needs. And this process is usually creative, interactive, and often open-ended. And then at the same time, we have to take care of the standards, legislation, and other factors around it. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we paramount the public safety, environment, and economics of it, which in general we can call it sustainability. So in engineering design is an application of the knowledge for the useful purpose. And those purposes could be many, many different things we deal with in our daily life. So whatever we design or whatever we work with in our daily life to solve a problem, so it has to meet some specific criteria. So in that criteria, number one is the desired goal. And whether that design or that idea is achieving that goal. And if not, that is a failure. That design doesn't work. It doesn't solve the purpose or serve the purpose. So it has to have some goal. For example, you want to design a combine harvester for the wheat harvesting, and you're aiming for an efficiency of 95%. So then your efficiency is, say, 30%. Yes, design is still workable, but we need to modify to give it to get to up to the mark, whichever is our desired goal. The second one is whether the materials are available, whether we have access to the sources to design that particular task or particular item. And then what are the energy sources needed or applied for that design? So what we have in terms of that. And then whether that design is environmentally sustainable and then economically viable, whether people can afford to buy that. And then there need to be a demand for that product, whatever we as an engineers or scientists are designing. At the end of the day, it should sell. Because when we work in a company and we take an idea to our CEO, the first thing that CEO is going to ask is whether he or she is able to sell that product or not. If your answer is no, this is an excellent idea, but we cannot sell it or there is no market for it, they're not interested. Okay, so there has to be some demand for that, any particular design. And then what are the social implications or societal barriers to accommodate or to account for that particular design? And that issue of the Volkswagen, that faulty injection valves and emissions, so that caused a big social implication for Volkswagen company. That design was okay, it was working fine, but the emissions they reported were lower than what it actually does. So that means it created a big social implication for the Volkswagen. They have to take all the Volkswagen vehicles back. They have to make the corrections, and also it ruined their reputation. So this is there could be few other factors in this, but these are the generic factors when we talk about design thinking and designing new product or systems for our processes for any given situation. So whenever we talk about the design thinking and designing a new thing, so there is usually a 6-step process, and it starts off with the problem identification, which usually, if an industry that comes to the audit office, research office, and they say we are dealing with this problem, can this institution or university help us in solving this problem? So that is problem identification. Then once the both parties agrees, yes, we will work on this problem, then the next step is to come up with the list of ideas. And that is, design process is always a team approach where we combine expertise from different discipline, and it is a multidisciplinary approach depending on the project. And then those ideas translated into a bit of a reality. They are refined. At the refinement stage, we took into account what are the requirements, what are the constraints. Sometimes the industry can have one big machine at their machine shop. They cannot afford to buy a new one, but they want to increase the efficiency. Then we are constrained by the space requirement or the industrial financial requirements that we have to work with that machine. And then we do some analysis. Those analyses could be stress analysis, strain analysis, economic analysis, environmental analysis. And we need to ensure that we meet all the standards and regulations, and then we come up with a decision. And sometimes, not all the times, in very first shot, we get the decision that we like. Sometimes it is a modification that we can have 3 possible decisions, which is acceptance, rejection, and modification. And sometimes rejection is not a bad thing. It gives it kind of closes the door for the other people to explore, which kind of avoids the wastage of resources. And then at the end, it goes to implementation with the workable drawings, and then it goes to manufacturing and go to the market. So those are the 6 possible steps or process whenever we design something. So this is the graphical way for that: identification, ideation, refinement, analysis, decision, and implementation. And design process is a method of creating innovative things, innovative solutions to meet the real world requirements. At the same time, we need to account for the real world constraints, because there will always be constraints, whether those are space constraints, those are financial constraints, those are environmental constraints, those are the labor constraints. So there will be constraints, and we need to account for those. So let's talk a little bit about the problem identification. So this is where I spend a little bit more time on the problem identification. Then I will walk you through this iterative design process in a very brief way. And then at the end, we can have question answers if you want to further discuss. So problem identification is very, very important stage whenever you are dealing with a problem. And this is the time where you want to put most of your energy in, because if you don't identify the problem in the right way, then your solution is not going to be right. So then you're wasting your time, energy, and effort because you did not identify your problem. So at this stage, once you identify your problem, you need to do background search. You need to look into the function and uniqueness, acceptable price range. Then what is the market demand out there? What are the environmental consideration? What are the safety consideration? What are the legal and the legislative considerations to account for? And then we need to build on that and link it with our problem. And then kind of think in a problem in a more practical way that what we can do about it. And this is a very famous quote from Albert Einstein, that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem. That is problem identification. And 5 minutes thinking about the solution. because that's where things start. So if we don't do it right at the identification stage, then the chances are that our solution's not going to be very effective and accurate. So now I brought here one example just to illustrate this problem identification. And this can apply to anywhere. So, and this is from my research, improving picking performance of a blueberry harvester as it loses 15 to 20% of fruit during mechanical harvesting. You can apply this concept to wheat harvesting, mechanical wheat harvester. And then you can visualize that there are losses from the wheat while it is harvesting. Now, the idea is to improve the picking reel of the wheat harvester or the design of the wheat harvester so that we can minimize these losses. So that's the problem, okay? So now considering that problem, then the next step which comes into my mind, why this is a big deal, why we are even concerned about it, what difference does it make? So now in my example, which is a blueberry harvester, so based on the 15 to 25% fruit losses, so there is a significant dollar value involved that per hectare, we can lose up to $4,000, which is huge. And now considering that, so if we multiply that or extrapolate that over the wild blueberry industry, that is about $15 million annually, which is dumped into the ground for inefficient harvesting method. So now the idea is that how can we deal with it? Yes, there is an economic aspect which we need to consider. And now the second thing which is important is that if we increase or come up with a better design, what we will end up doing, we will increase profitability, we will improve berry recovery. And then at the same time, for the industry we are working with, so it's going to add a bit of value into their competitiveness with the other manufacturers. And try to visualize and apply this concept to the wheat campaign, which is going on under the leadership of Dr. Ikrar Khan. That yes, we need to improve on the wheat yield. At the same time, one aspect of it is that how we can minimize losses. We always talk about food security, but at the same time, we waste a lot of food, okay? So what we can do about it. So being said that, so now looking at this statement, analyzing that economically, looking into more of a business aspect of it. So this turned out to be a big issue, and solving this problem can help us in maybe a better patent modification to the design, which adds to our credibility as researchers, students, or a team. And then at the same time, it improve the competitiveness and reputation of the company we are working with. So now just to visualize this problem. So this is a blueberry harvester, and this is 25 times slower video. So it scoops through the blueberry plants, it picks up, it is a rotating reel, basically similar to the wheat harvester. And then you can see that on the front, there are some berries which are going down on the floor or on the ground. And then on the back, there are some losses. So this is to actually establish that we are dealing with this problem, and this problem is real. And also to deal with this machine, that what kind of modifications we can think about it, okay? So this video, we installed 3 cameras just to identify the problem, one in the front, one in the back, and one inside the harvester, to capture a good view and give us a bit of an idea that where the problem lies and how we can solve. So this is a graphical design. So there is so it basically works as a combing mechanism. It scoops through the blueberry plants, picks up, drops the inside conveyor. From inside conveyor, it goes to the side conveyor on the top, and then it goes to the bin where it gets stored. So there are those teeth and cam followers. So they do the job, they go back and forth, pick it up, and then harvest the wild blueberries. So now once we identify that problem, and the problem identification usually can come from different ways, that you can visit the facility of your client. You can have an interactive talk with them, meetings with them to identify the problem. Then also, you can also go and make videos, analyze the system, and try to understand what this is. And then as a team, you sit together as a group of students, student combination, or in collaboration with the professors or researchers, and then you come up with the preliminary ideas. So for example, you brainstorm for a while, and then you make hand sketches, list ideas, then adapt to concepts. And at this preliminary idea stage, innovation and critical thinking is very, very important. Don't jump into conclusions, because this is purely innovative thought process and critical thinking, design thinking, and let everybody speak. Sometimes some people, they try to control the meeting or brainstorming, avoid critiquing, and then determine the price range. So this is more like a brainstorming session where those ideas emerge in a more innovative way. And then we will take care of those ideas and the details and around that as we go through the design process. So now this is a graphical representation. So at the idea stage, the creativity is very, very important. So it is very high. But as we walk through the entire design process, where we have ideas, then refinement, analysis, decisions, then data and information become important. Because for each and every design, we need to consider the practicality, we need to consider the requirements of those designs, we need to consider the constraints of those designs. So as we move into refinement, analysis, and decision, then data and information become really important. And then we need to keep in mind that at this stage, we need to do our due diligence to do a good job in designing something which actually solves a problem. So based on this small example I showed you, and you can, as I said, you can apply that to the wheat harvester, combine harvester. So there are some proposed ideas which can solve that problem of the berry losses. Maybe using the longer teeth which are mounted on the periphery of the head, so that the berries cannot fall, they are retained within the head. Then another idea comes to the mind is accurate relative motion, that we operate the harvester and head revolutions in a way that we are providing enough and adequate time for the berries to be recovered and kind of land on the inside conveyor. Then the third idea could be minimize the force exerted by the harvester. So we need to play with the forces. And again, that is in combination with the relative motion. Then the fourth idea that comes into mind is developing some autonomous system that it on the go make adjustments, whether it goes through the tall plants or smaller or the short plants, and then make those adjustments as we go and solve this problem. So those are some, there could be 20 different ideas on top of these. So those are just examples, like when you think critically and your approach is right and you spend adequate and enough time on this, so then you will come up with the actually practical and innovative ideas to solve that industrial problem. So now once those ideas are done up, so the next step is the refinement, where we consider the requirements and constraints, geometry, how the design look, what are the lengths and angles, what are the weights, and then you come up with the decision matrix that you have 5 different ideas, which idea meets the most of the requirements and constraints. And then you go ahead with that idea, try it out. You might have to come back as it is iterative process and make some modification and adjustments to make it work better, but that's the starting point. So at the refinement, we do need to consider requirements and constraints of that particular problem. So then we move on, we pick one idea, which we think based on the decision matrix it's going to actually do the job. So then we do different kind of analysis on this. So application of engineering, we do some simulation and graphical analysis, we do economic analysis, we do environmental analysis, then logic and intuition come into play, and then we do mathematical calculation, stress, strain, load analysis, whatever it might look like. So based on that, then you have a bit of evidence and numerical data to support that, yes, your design or the chosen design is good. But if your analysis doesn't support what you thought at the refinement stage, then you need to go back and pick another idea and try that out. Then keep going until you meet maximum of your requirements and accommodate for maximum of your constraints. So for example, this is one of the table I brought. And if you're designing something, so there are certain things you keep in mind, and these are from North America. So these limits. So for example, noise factor, comfortable level is 85 decibels, safety limit is 94. If your design is above 94, so then it's not going to pass the safety. So then you need to do something about it to bring it close to 85 or even less than that. The same way, UV light, atomic radiation, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, humidity, temperature, those are the set standards set by the federal organizations in the country that we need to abide by and make sure our design process is adequate and it kind of encompasses around or lower those limits so that we can sell it and it passed through the safety process and it passed through the logistical challenges and other things. So once that's all done, then the next step is decision. As I said earlier, so there could be 3 possible decisions. One is accept as is, which is rarely the case. Usually there is some iteration and modifications. And then reject it completely so that it doesn't work, it doesn't meet any requirements or accommodate for constraints. That is straight rejection. And that is a learning process. So the rejection is not always a bad thing. Yes, we spend some resources and time, but we learn. And then also based on the performance and efficiency, we can always go back, modify and tweak around different things and have a modified design which meet the most of the requirements and constraints. So then at the end of this design thought process, so we go to the implementation. Once we identify that our design is perfect, idea is good, we have done due diligence, it meets the requirements and constraints, then that is the implementation stage where we give it to the manufacturer to build that and supply that to the consumer or to the market. So at this stage, we have working prototypes, models, operational manuals. Then we work with the contractors or manufacturers. And then we give the fabrication details. We give the diameters and lengths and widths and angles and all those details for the manufacturer to actually manufacture it right. So that's the implementation stage when it comes to the design process. So now, as I described very briefly earlier, and I like a quote from one of my former dean that this is not your grandfather engineering anymore. So we don't do things as they were done 30 years ago. So these days, any problem is tackled with the interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary team, where the different expertise combined together, they work on the same project from different angles and different expertise and solve that problem. For example, there could be many other team players. I just came up with one I would say the team, which is engineers, scientists, technologists, technicians, craftspeople, designers. They can work together to solve an industrial engineering problem by applying the concept of the design thinking and integrating the design process and design methodology and doing different kind of analysis to come up with something which is really useful and it actually does serve the humanity and the people around us. So now I want to bring a different perspective to it. So yes, once we design everything, so that is the tip of the iceberg. So we also need to account for the societal challenges, dependence, and ethics of it. Okay, so ethics is what we think and do in our daily life. So that is ethics. Okay, so basically we always have to take into account that we need to do things in a right way by applying the ethical principles, considering what are the societal needs and challenges. At the same time, sometimes we forget about ethics and try to make things to make the profitability. That's what the most of the industry want. And so we as an engineers or scientists, we need to make sure we apply ethics in our engineering problems and solution, so that we are not always striving for the money, but at the same time, we are looking about the society, we are thinking about the environment, we are thinking about the sustainability, and it is a good thing overall for the general society. So now the next thing which need to account for is the economics of it. So so to me, economics is very, very important. And I have taught many different courses, and I teach engineering economics at the University of PEI. And this is my favorite course to teach. I do that in a real practical way. I bring different examples from highway projects and different examples from actually machining projects and whatnot, to give our graduate a sense that this is very important skill set to have, and apply that skill set to actually engineering design process. So the design decisions are usually very stable. We apply science, and those are the fundamental principles. But the economic decisions, they are time variant. And we as an engineers, we need to look into what are the prices today and what is the forecasted price few years from now. Because if we start a highway project, due to inflation, the price is going to go high. Did we account for in our budget and whatnot? So those designs, and especially the long-term projects, so the engineering economics knowledge, time value of money, rate of return, interest rates, and the design cycle, so they all go hand in hand. So the design decisions are not time variant, so we apply the science and it stays the same. Economic decisions are time variant. And bringing back the ethics and engineering design, so that it is not to be expert in all things. So as I said, so in today's world, we go with a team approach where we have different expertise and we combine things and expertise for a mutual goal. And it is not necessary that you have to be expert in everything. And it is to carry the ability and the responsibility to understand and do the engineering with regard to public safety and welfare and environment and sustainability, we can add on. So the ability part, we can cover through our educational systems, that our professors, our curriculum, our educational bodies, so they create that ability to do things and provide the foundations to the graduates to do things right. But the responsibility part is missing. That comes from the ethics. What are our social responsibilities? That's usually, that part is ignored in the curriculum. So we need to think in a more integrated way, where we think about society, we think about the environment, we think about the economics, and if we combine those three pillars, that makes the sustainability. So that's all I have, and I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I can take any questions you might have.
Yeah, our guest speaker is based overseas, so if there are any questions, we can entertain questions now, and then we go for the second presentation of the day. Someone from there actually runs mobile telephone, probably recording it. It's very annoying. आपकी लाइट सीधी मेरी आंखों में आती है. हम इसको रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हैं, यूट्यूब पे लगा, तो जितनी बार मर्जी खोल के सुन लेना इसको, लेकर ये मोबाइल जो है इसकी लाइट इस तरफ ना चलाओ. जी, क्वेश्चंस. दे भाई वहाँ माइक दे, माइक दे. ये डिजाइन थिंकिंग के ऊपर है. इत्तेजाज इज एन इंजीनियर, सो ही यूज्ड द एग्जांपल ऑफ मशीन, बट डिजाइन थिंकिंग इज an essential part of our research that we are doing. End of the day, there should be some target to be achieved. This is what he is trying to probably explain, using the example of a machine. But let's see what are the questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Azaz, for the nice presentation. Although it relates to directly the engineering side, but I am dealing with the content education. But right now, my concern is directly with the engineering aspect of presentation. You know, the running out of machinery and depreciation is a very common phenomenon. What are the factors based on we have to, I mean, while designing, to consider that depreciation and running out of this machine will be considered in the market? Thank you.
It's all, have you received the question properly?
I couldn't understand it properly, so it was little.
The question is more about depreciation of machines.
Depreciation of machines?
Depreciation.
Yes, no, that's if I understand it correctly, yes, we need to account for the depreciation, and that is covered in the economic analysis part of it. Whenever we design something, so we have a useful life, and in that useful life, whether that is 5 years or 10 years, at the end of the useful life, we have a salvage value, which is typically 10% of the machine cost. So yes, we need to consider that. And by the way, in Canada, so that depreciation is an expense, and companies claim that in their tax returns.
So depreciation is actually claimed as tax, part of the tax return.
Yeah, it is a tax credit.
Tax credit. Yeah, Anjam.
It is a very nice presentation, Lasa. So I have two short questions. One is that I think in addition to design and development, one important parameter is the operation of the agriculture machinery. So when we are talking about combined harvesting system, then I think there are two parameters which are very important. One is the reel index, and second is the cutting index. And then I think the clearance of the concave and cylinder is also very important. So how do we manage that the operational parameters should be maintained constant? For example, I think for the wheat harvesting, the reel index should be 1.25 and cutting index should be 2. So how do you manage all these type of things in a machine? So second, my question is that when we are talking about key criteria for design, I think efficiency is also one of the main factors which should be taken into consideration.
Yes, I think there is no magic way to come up with those operational settings. So usually those come either with the hit and trial or the experience. So whatever is the cutting index or the reel speed for the combine harvester, and we need to run different scenarios. That's what we as a researcher or as a part of the design analysis. So that's what we do. And then based on those, and then we need to obviously quantify what is the efficiency. And based on that, we can say that this parameter or this setting is actually going to do the job. And this is relative motion at this what ground speed, this one of the revolution of the reel, along with this cutting speed and cutting index. So we can do the job properly with the highest efficiency. And my apologies, there is a bit of an echo and I'm having a hard time in listening to the questions. So if I'm not on track, so I didn't answer properly. So that's because I didn't understand the question right.
Itazal, I think you have handled the question very well. G, is there any other question? Yep, either join Mike Davis.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. I have a question about the comparison that you have given about economic decision and design decisions. You had mentioned that economic decisions are time variant, while design decisions are not time variant. But don't you think that in the current day, when technologies are changing at a rapid pace, and also there are societal changes are also coming very rapidly, the design decisions are also becoming time variant?
Yeah. So what I meant by the design decisions are time variant, for example, Newton's second law. If we are applying that Newton's second law, so even 100 years before, so that's the same law. So those fundamentals don't change. Yes, like if we look into computers, 70 years ago or 30 years ago, or even when I went to the university back in 2003, we deal with the heavy big computers. Now in our phone, we have a computer. But the laws which are working behind, they are basically the same. The processors are new, the computing speed has increased, but there is no new patent into it. So for the most of the parts, so the design, which is application of engineering and science and integration of that knowledge, for the most part, those fundamentals don't change. Yes, there could be several things which we can add and remove. And on the economic side of things, so we know the market is ever changing and depreciation is there, interest is always fluctuating, material prices are going up or down. So they are not stable even for 24 hours. Look at the gas prices or even the diesel and petrol prices in the given market. So say if we budget something for a coal plant or a gas plant and we quote the price for today, that's not going to be true even for 10 days from today. And then if we don't account for that change, then there is a good chance that the project's going to fail economically.
Any more questions? Ji, please go ahead.
So I have a question. So what is the role of mathematical modeling in design thinking? Please elaborate a bit.
Okay. The role of mathematical modeling is, no one can ignore that, because before we go into prototype and actually physically build any model or prototype, so we need to run simulations and do some mathematical modeling and projections to have a good confidence and sense whether whatever we are going to develop and spend the resources on, it is going to actually work. So yes, the lab conditions or simulated conditions will be off by reality, but it will be a good gesture and sense of it that how close we are. So based on that, so I would say that the role of mathematical modeling or simulations cannot be ignored. So it is very, very important part of the design process.
Thank you very much for such a nice presentation. I have a question regarding the problem identification. Whether it should be taken from the publications or from the direct beneficiary of the industry. If you compare, let us know. If you
Yeah, I think sometimes we rely too much on the publications, and which is not, to me, I think the real problems are solved by interacting with the real people. So if there is a problem that is faced by a grower in your neighborhood and you are reading a publication from United States that may not even apply, or it might not be relevant. So I think for any kind of a problem, whether that is a societal problem, and I used to have a professor, Don McEwen, He was president for Engineers Canada. I'm going to quote his one of his quote, that any problem you can draw a picture of, you can solve it. So, and one of the student asked him a question, how about the relationship problem? He said, yeah, even in a relationship, if you draw a picture and find out what is working, what isn't working, so you will solve that problem too. So I think the key to problem solving is to interact with the industry, interact with the problem, the company who's having a problem, whether that is a grower or an organization, and then visit their facilities. Sometimes we, as a scientist, want to solve problem, but don't get out of the lab. So we need to go out and interact with the people. So that gives us a real sense what's going on. And based on that, we can solve the problem.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, let me offer some comments. The purpose of organizing this design thinking lecture was to look at our overall research portfolio and analyze if research portfolios are design based. ये भी बड़ा अच्छा सवाल किया किसी ने कि जो रिसर्च टास्क है या प्रॉब्लम है वो एप्लीकेशन से लेना चाहिए या रियल लाइफ से लेना चाहिए, और सबको यही बता दिया। वो मैंने कल जो आपको बायोडीजल की एग्जांपल सुनाई थी ना, वो आपका कोई साथी था जिसने पब्लिकेशन से लिया था। और फिर मैंने कल एग्जांपल एक दी थी कि 15% गंदम जो है वो हार्वेस्टर फेंक जाता है। अब इसके लिए पब्लिकेशन ढूंढने की तो जरूरत ही नहीं है, साफ नजर आ रहा है 15% दाने हैं, ये कैसे बचाने। तो आज ये मैंने इत्तलात से कहा था इस लेक्चर के लिए, लेकिन मुझे ये नहीं पता था कि वो एक हार्वेस्टर की एग्जांपल भी लाएगा और वो बिलूबारी वाला। तो ये एग्जैक्टली वही स्टोरी है यहाँ। अच्छा, इस स्टोरी पे ऊपर मुझे आज और मजीद बड़ी ड्रॉनी इंफॉर्मेशन आई है कि मुल्क में इस वक्त अकॉर्डिंग टू द इंपोर्ट फिगर्स 30,000 के करीब हार्वेस्टर। अब अगर 30,000 हार्वेस्टर आपने नए खरीदने हो, even at depreciated price, it would be something like 50 to 60,000 billion, 1,000 crore. तो ये मतलब ये नियर इम्पॉसिबिलिटी है इन टर्म्स ऑफ बेसिक इन्वेस्टमेंट। तो उसकी इम्प्रूवमेंट इज पॉसिबल। ये कौन खरीदेगा, कैसे खरीदेंगे? प्राइवेट सेक्टर के पहले क्या, लेकिन गवर्नमेंट भी चाहे तो इतना बड़ा मशीनरी पूल इन वन को क्रिएट नहीं कर सकते। तो ये इस तरह के रियल लाइफ प्रॉब्लम है, लेकिन हमें पता है 15% कदम ज़्यादा हो रही है। मैंने कल बताया था कि वो इस साल के 175 अरब रुपए। अब वो इकोनॉमिक और एथिक्स की एप्लीकेशन के साथ में इत्तलात में जिक्र किया है। तो अगर बायोडीजल वाली एग्जाम्पल को रिविजिट करें तो ना उसमें इकोनॉमिक्स और एथिक्स। ये एग्जाम्पल यूज हुई है यहाँ पे। आप 200-300 किस्म के ब्रेन एट वर्क बैठे हैं, उन सब का अपना एक सोचने का प्रोसेस है और हमें बिल्कुल उसको रिस्पेक्ट करना चाहिए। हम करते हैं रिस्पेक्ट, और इंडिपेंडेंट थॉट प्रोसेस बड़ा जरूरी है। लेकिन आपका इंडिपेंडेंट थॉट प्रोसेस अगर मिट्टी तोड़ी का तेल निकाल के डीजल बना रहा है तो ना वो एथिकल है और ना ही बायोडीजल की स्टोरी क्या है? 2007-8 में जिस तरह से अब एनर्जी की प्राइस स्पाइक की, इससे ज्यादा स्पाइक की, तो बायोडीजल की स्टोरी शुरू हो गई। इसलिए कि कॉर्न इन द वेस्ट इज ऑलवेज सरप्लस, तो कॉर्न ऑयल को बायोडीजल में कन्वर्ट करना शुरू कर दिया, या लेफ्ट ओवर एडिबल ऑयल जो वो सारे केमिस्ट को से बेहतर जानते हैं। एस्टिफिकेशन कहते हैं उसको, एस्टिफिकेशन से जी ट्रांस। तो उस प्रोसेस से वो तकरीबन उसकी यील्ड 50% कन्वर्ट हो जाता है ऑयल इनटू डीजल। यही है ना, तकरीबन 50% आया। अब अगर 6,000 रुपए का 1 किलो सीड आए और उसको अगर 50% उसमें से ऑयल निकले और 50% का 50% जो है वो डीजल निकले, तो 1 किलो से तकरीबन 250 मिलीलीटर डीजल निकलेगा अप्रॉक्सीमेटली। 250 मिलीलीटर ऑयल जो है वो 6,000 रुपए को खरीदेगा कोई? वो कहेगा अब्दुल्ला नहीं खरीदेगा। So कोई इकोनॉमिक सेंस और सर्च की होनी चाहिए ना, कॉमन सेंस भी होनी चाहिए, पेपर फर्स्ट क्लास पब्लिश हो। तो ये वैसे बातों में बात यहाँ तक पहुंच गई है, मैंने उसको नहीं बताया था कि मैंने कल गाड़ी की स्टोरी सुनाई। इकोनॉमिक्स और एथिक्स रिसर्च को ड्राइव भी करता, तो कम से कम रिसर्चर को बाइंड, ये भी बाइंडिंग फोर्सेस हैं जो हमें रिसर्च में सोचनी चाहिए। Next week. Okay, so Izzaz, thank you very much. We are continuing with another talk. You are welcome to continue, or you are free to leave. Our next talk, Dr. Abdul Sleri will speak about COP26. He has just returned from Glasgow after attending COP26. मैंने उन्हें कहा था कि आप ये COP स्टोरी जब से शुरू हुई है ना, वो सारी स्टोरी थोड़ी रिव्यू कर दें और बता दें कि COP26 से अब कैसा रहा। He sent me two of his recent newspaper articles, जो कि मैंने आपके साथ शेयर किए हैं। तो अगर आपने पढ़े हो तो अच्छी बात होगी, नहीं तो आज डिस्कशन के बाद जरूर पढ़िए। ये क्लाइमेट चेंज जो है ये हम सब के लिए एक कॉमन चैलेंज है। तो अभी डॉक्टर सुलैरी का इंतजार कर रहे हैं। जी प्लीज गो अहेड।
Thank you, sir. I have to go for another meeting, so thank you for the invitation.
Right here.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So while Dr. Abdul join, I will read out his profile. Dr. Abu Sari has been heading Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Pakistan's premier policy research think tank since 2007. He is the member of different policy making forums and advisory boards, including Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, National Advisory Council for Planning Commission of Pakistan, Pakistan's Climate Change Council, convener of Food Security Advisory Group at the National Security Division, Government of Pakistan, and member of the Board of Directors of National Disaster Management Fund. He is also serving on different international policy making forums, including Advisory Board of Intergovernmental Organizations and member of the Permanent Organizing Committee of South Asia Economic Summit, co-chair of the Board of Climate Action Network South Asia, and lead expert for World Economic Forum Transformation Marketing Mapping Initiative from Pakistan. He also served on 3 judicial commissions formed by Supreme Court on environmental issues, as well as member of Board of Management of Pakistan State Oil. Dr. Suleri represented Pakistan in various official delegations, including UN Sustainable Development Summit, United Nations Conference on Conference of Parties, which is known as COP, and WTO Ministerial Conference. He is an acclaimed writer and, besides publishing in academic journals, also contributes in policy analysis on sustainable development issues, both in print and electronic media. He is also editor-in-chief of peer-reviewed Journal of Development Policy Research and Practice. Dr. Suleri earned his PhD in food security from the University of Greenwich, and last but not the least, he is also alumnus of UA. So this is brief introduction.
ये फूड सिक्योरिटी की बात चल पड़ी, सारी साहब की एक्सपर्टी है फूड सिक्योरिटी में। तो फूड सिक्योरिटी इस वक्त हम भी काफी उसके मतलब वरीड है, भाग दौड़ है, लेकिन तो फूड सिक्योरिटी की डिजाइन की एग्जाम्पल मैं आपके सामने पेश करता हूँ। 1940s में, अर्ली 40s में 2 कहत पड़े, एक बंगाल फैमन और एक मैक्सिकन फैमन। जब वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 चल रही थी, millions of people died in Bengal and in Mexico. The famine of Bengal was not about the supply of staple. It was more of hoarding, exploitation, और जखीरा दोजी जिसको कहते हैं. और लेकिन जो मैक्सिकन फैमिली था, that was a case of epidemic disease which literally killed the entire crop of corn for them at that time. तो वो जो बंगाल फैमिली है उसमें, since it was not a technical and engineering issue, it was a more social issue. तो उसका जो इन्वेस्टिगेटर था उसने नोबेल प्राइज लिया. आई होप यू नो क्या नाम है जी उनका, जो बंगाली नोबेल प्राइज विनर है, सैम, अमृता सैम. और जिसने मैक्सिकन फैमिली पे काम किया उसने भी नोबेल प्राइज लिया. उस नोबेल प्राइज विनर का नाम है नॉर्मन बोरलैंड. तो ये फूड सिक्योरिटी और फैमिन, उन पे दोनों पे मुख्तलिफ एंगल से रिसर्च हुई एंड इन बोथ केसेस लेड टू द अवार्ड ऑफ नोबेल प्राइज. दोनों के डिजाइन डिफरेंट है. देखिए जो सैम का काम है वो सोशल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन का ही, सोशल इकोनॉमिस्ट, लेकिन जो बोरला का काम था उसमें बड़ा डिजाइन क्लेवर है. खराब फेलियर क्यों हुई? यहाँ बहुत सारे बायोलॉजिकल बैकग्राउंड के हम लोग बैठे हैं. That was the failure of a monoculture. In a monoculture, when epidemic spreads, it spreads and wipes out everything. The strategy that Borla presented to prevent future famines was to produce varieties which the top breeders use fertile land. And phenotypically, they are, near sibling, 99%. or so, but there is mixture of genotypes of disease resistance. So that even though visibly it's not monoculture, they look like pure line of monoculture, but they have different barriers in the form of resistance available. And that is our current design of at least wheat varieties. So there's a design thinking behind creating disease-resistant varieties. We have the machine की thinking डिस्कस की, social sciences में इस तरह से design होती है. हम सब जो अपने expert हैं, we should also try to think that what are the economic and ethical implications of this. Okay, जी, sir, welcome. Please get started.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ikhtar Saab and Dr. Babar Shahbaz. It's a real privilege and honor for me to be back at my alumni. While Babar was introducing me, I had joined as one of the participants, not as a speaker, so I could hear him. But I think I take pride that it's not my PhD from University of Greenwich, but my bachelor's and my master's degree from University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, that enabled me to be whatever I am today. And one thing that I can always recommend is one of the advantage of being at Agriculture University is its interdisciplinarity. That during BSc, we get to learn too much about everything, almost every aspect and every discipline that then in rest of the life, it keeps on helping us. Now, I'll come straight to the topic. Today, I'm asked to cover climate change, especially COP26, what happened there and what are the outcomes. I'll also be inclined to touch upon a bit of economy because this is what I've been doing for last 20 years now, macroeconomy of Pakistan. And I'll also like to touch upon agriculture. I haven't prepared a presentation because I want it to be an interactive session. So I'll just give you about 10 minutes background of COP26, and then I'll be happy to take your questions and to respond them on the three aspects that I have told you. So I'll be happy to take your questions on climate change and COP26. I'll be happy to take your questions on economy, Pakistan's economic situation, and I'll be happy to take question on agriculture policy because this is what we do at STPI. We call ourselves Shadow Cabinet. And as Shadow Cabinet, we try to prepare and produce all the policies that can help government do its job in a better manner. So starting with the COP26, and I was incidentally there, it was my 10th COP that I attended. So I was there in Glasgow as part of Pakistan's delegation to COP. And the COPs are, it's become an annual ritual. Every year there is a COP. But then we know that certain COPs, those become more important than others. COP is an abbreviation of Conference of Parties, as you know. The parties who are a signatory to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. The Paris COP, you must have heard of it back in 2015. That got a lot of importance. And the reason it got a lot of importance, by then it had confirmed through scientific research that it's the anthropogenic activities, human activities, which are causing this global warming. And 197 members of this COP26, they had gathered to think of the ways of reducing this global warming. This was a unique conference because Barack Obama, President of United States, who had been awarded Nobel Prize in anticipation of his work for COP and further, he played his best role. He had meeting with the Chinese counterpart, President Xi, and there was this high-level meeting at the start of COP21 in Paris, where the international community agreed to take revolutionary steps, which they called NDCs, nationally determined contributions, that how they would be bringing down carbon dioxide emission. Now, when we talk of carbon dioxide emission, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind that this emission was constant starting from 1500 BC until around 1910. So if you look at from 1500 BC to 1910, CO2, this particles per million in atmosphere, those were constant around 238 ppm. Then came industrial revolution, and with industrialization, the amount of CO2 in atmosphere, it started increasing. From 1910 till 1970, it had increased to somewhere about 375 ppm. And in 2020, it had increased to around 475 ppm. So look at the amount of CO2 that keeps getting accumulated in atmosphere. From 1500 BC till 1900, it was constant, then it started increasing, and then in a matter of century, it was doubled. So now we are talking of 475 ppm. And as you know that this carbon, when it gets accumulated in the atmosphere, it plays the role of a greenhouse and it increases Earth's temperature. And that was the preamble through which countries were asked to give their nationally determined contribution, something that they would do on a voluntary basis to reduce the CO2 emission. Countries, they gave their ambitions at the Paris Declaration, at COP21 Paris. But then again, the modelers, the climate modelers, when they analyzed those NDCs, they found out that even if all of those were acted upon in letter and spirit, it will not be able to curtail global warming by 2% above the pre-industrial limit. The amount that was coming, it was around 2.7. And that is why it was asked that countries, they need to rethink of their plans, come up with ambitious plan. And those ambitious plans were to be presented in COP26, which got postponed last year due to COVID, and this year it happened. So that's why after Paris, if there was this resonance and importance, it was being given to Glasgow COP. So the countries went there with the increased ambitions. Those ambitions, again, the modelers, they tell us that the target of 2% increase above pre-industrial limit, that would be missed. If all of those ambitions, those are acted upon, it will still take us to somewhere 2.5 degree centigrade temperature increase above pre-industrial level, which would of course result in glacier melting and sea rise increase that may create havoc in planet. So this is what was happening. Now in Glasgow, there were three things which were expected. One was these increased ambitions. Second was the discussion on dirty fuel, which is coal. And it was for the first time that in any UNFCCC document, fossil fuel was being directly mentioned as one of the causes of global warming. But on top of it, the developing countries, they were more interested in finding out the climate financing position, because most of us, including Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan's NDC, National Determined Contribution, Pakistan said that they would be able to implement 30% of NDC from own resources, but in order to implement rest of the 70%, they required climate financing. Now, climate financing is something which is not a charity. So when Pakistan, for example, asked for climate financing, we are not asking for any dole or not asking for any charity. All we are asking that industrious nations, developed nations which have developed by burning coal, they must contribute towards compensation now, and they must mitigate and they must give funds for adaptation. So this is the process. In Paris, the countries, they had agreed that by 2020, they would be establishing a climate finance fund, which would be $100 billion per annum. But last year, the numbers which were quoted, it was $90 billion, and most of it was relabeled and rebranded commitment. For example, ADB and World Bank and many other countries, the loans that they have given, they branded them as climate finance fund, and they accumulated a number of $90 billion. Now in the Glasgow, the discussion was that if America, for example, can give $2 trillion as a fiscal stimulus for COVID-19 to its citizen, why can't it contribute towards climate financing fund, which is a peanut compared to $2 trillion stimulus that it gave. Similarly, if you look at EU's collective fiscal stimulus, it comes to around $1 trillion. So the countries that can dole out trillions of dollars on COVID fiscal stimulus on their citizens, they are not taking responsibilities for more than 143 developing countries who are suffering from climate change, not because of their fault, but because of emission from industrial countries. Now, life could have been simple if there were only two blocks, developed country and developing countries in COP26. There is a third block as well. And the third block is emerging economies, which include China, which include Russia, which include South Africa, and which include India and Brazil. Developed countries, they are willing to provide money, but they are saying that if America is, China is the highest emitter of CO2 in the world today. China emits more than 25% of total CO2 emission in the world. On second number is America. On third number is India, which emits 13% of total CO2 emission globally. On fourth number is Russia. Now, developed world says that it's not only the industrialized nations which have to pay. They point finger towards China and India and Russia, that these countries who are the largest emitters, they should also contribute towards that fund. So that is a trilateral discussion and debate that was going on. Now, in the COP26, the major principle is that all the decisions they are taken on the basis of a consensus. If any single country says no, that means that the draft text would remain bracketed. It will not be a consensus declaration. And that is where countries, they were using their muscle power to negotiate. Another thing in the multilateral negotiation, be it COP26 or WTO, if you are not present in negotiation or if you remain silent, silence or absence, it is taken as acceptance of the argument. Now, countries like Pakistan, which have hardly 10 to 12 people in their official delegation and hardly 6 to 8 negotiators, they are at the loss in these multilateral conferences because there are more than 50 to 60 items under negotiation around the clock. So if we have 8 negotiators, we will be able to just attend the 8 high priority meetings. It means in 42 negotiations, we will be showing our consensus simply by not being present there. EU and USA and China and others, of course, by virtue of their technical capacities, they are able to take lead in almost all the negotiations. Now, looking at the fact that it was difficult to come up with consensus position, one interesting thing that happened in COP26, it was alliance of the willings. Countries, subnational states, for example, many states of America and private sector, they started making alliances around certain things which could not become part of Glasgow Pact. So, for example, there was an alliance on phasing out of fossil fuel. There was an alliance of financial institute that they would not invest in any coal-powered energy plant. There was an alliance on a complete ban on illegal deforestation by 2030. There was an alliance on reduction of methane gas emission by 30% by 2030. There was an alliance on replacing conventional motor vehicles with electronic vehicles. So there are different alliances. Pakistan became part of 2 alliances. One is reduction of methane gas emission by 2030 by 30%, which is a big commitment from my perspective, because natural gas that we use, our LNG, it is, as you know, 90% is methane. So it means that if we are committing that by 2030 we would be reducing its use by 30%, it means that the Prime Minister's vision of increasing our renewable energy share in our total energy source, that needs to be materialized, which would mean more hydro electricity and more solar electricity if we have to change our dependence on fossil fuel, or if we have to change our dependence on methane gas. Similarly, we also joined the pledge for banning deforestation, which means that it's not only afforestation, billion tsunami tree campaign on which we have to focus. We will have to equally give equal focus to ban deforestation. And that, again, target has to be met by year 2030. As I said, that the revolutionary thing in this COP26 was discussion on fossil fuel. Fossil fuel has always been something, a shajre mamnua in these discussions due to petrostates influence. Petrostates, Russia and America, all of them, they were together in it. But this time, coal was being discussed very openly. This time, inefficient subsidies on fossil fuel were discussed very openly. And there was a proposed text in the draft phasing out coal and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, they were opposing it. And on the very last moment, on the extra time that was bought to come for consensus, India put its foot down, and India said that unless and until this phasing out would be replaced by phasing down, India will not agree to the final declaration. So this phasing out was replaced by phasing down. So now the final text says that coal power plants would be phased down and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies would be phased down. It's still an open-ended question by when it would happen, but at least it's a nice beginning. On finance, as I said, that developing countries, they got disappointed by the attitude of developed world, but we were asking for loss and damage mechanism. One thing is climate financing fund, which I told you, $100 billion. Second thing is loss and damage funds. So the countries like Pakistan and also around 100 other countries, they're saying that all the losses that we have incurred due to climate change, which was not our fault, and all the future losses that we would incur due to climate change, which is not our fault if we are not the largest emitter, we should be compensated for it. And for that, the term which is used is called loss and damage fund. In Paris, we tried to push it, we couldn't succeed. This time, at least, we got succeeded in getting this phrase in the final text, that the countries, they would keep discussing the modalities of loss and damage fund. So it means that if we will keep on discussing the modalities, perhaps a few years down the road, we can able to get some sort of commitment from rich nations. Finally, we were asking for adaptation. So mitigation is something, and as you know, the difference between mitigation and adaptation, I will not go into detail, but adaptation in our case, for example, having a seawall at Gwadar or at Karachi, that would come under adaptation. And we were asking for equal split between mitigation and adaptation from climate finance fund. That got accepted. So that was a minor success that the developing countries could achieve, that whatever would be allocated for climate finance fund, that would be equally distributed between climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And finally, before I conclude, it is about carbon market mechanism. Carbon market mechanism is again something where countries like Pakistan have a lot of scope and success. We can sell our a billion tree afforestation in that, because these are the steps that the countries are taking to offset carbon in other countries. So if India or China, for example, they keep on insisting to remain on coal-based power plant, they can buy carbon credits from countries like Pakistan, whose share of carbon is less. So we can give them our green schemes, they can buy those credits. So a comparatively transparent mechanism has been finally decided in Glasgow. And now we would have to see that how we can build our technical capacity to make the maximum benefit out of it. Glasgow COP, along with the other technical negotiation, is an excellent opportunity for policy advocacy as well. So it's not only the scientists and the negotiators that attend COP, it is the policy advocates. And the Day of Solidarity, which was celebrated on 7th of November, the streets of Glasgow saw the largest protest in the recent history. More than 100,000 people, they were gathered in streets of Glasgow asking for climate justice. And climate justice is, the philosophy is very simple, that the highest polluter, they need to compensate for their emission and pollution, and the countries whose share in the global emission is negligible. And by the way, Pakistan's share is less than 1%. So the countries like Pakistan, we need to get compensated for it. So that is the whole philosophy behind climate justice. But to conclude, while we should keep on pressing developed world for compensating for their wrong deeds, at home, we need to bring our house in order. We cannot keep on waiting for rich countries to pay us to do something that we should do in any case. We know that this is the only livable planet in this cosmopolitan. This planet is here to stay, but we may not be here if we keep on following business as usual. Our ways of doing business, our ways of living, if we don't reduce our carbon emission, it means that we will make this planet unlivable. So irrespective of the funds that rich countries, they have to give, and they should give it, we need to bring our house in order, and we need to think for building forward better. So far, we have been talking of building back better. I think building back better is an old phrase and an old philosophy now. Now we have to think of building forward better, that whatever we build, that needs to be green, that needs to be clean, and that should reduce our carbon footprints, so that we can be proud when we leave some sort of green carbon legacy for our future generations. I'll stop here, and for rest of an hour, I'll be happy to take your questions, as I said, on climate change, on economy, on agriculture, or any other policy matter that you feel where you need any clarification, as you need any response from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Surari, for updating us on Conference of Parties, the 26th in number. Yeah, conveyed your message. Let's see what kind of discussion it evokes. The questions. From my
very for enlightening us on this issue.
I think, of course, we need at the national level, the developing countries, including Pakistan, they have a minimum contribution in extending such kind of devastation. But as you have said that we are most targeted countries in that sense. So we need a national level, something designed type of thinking in that sense that just like a bead campaign we have in the university that is revolutionary, similar type of climate change campaign or something with the help of universities and government institutions can be designed to have the capacity building at that level.
Well, thank you. I think climate change and working on a green agenda, in my humble opinion, it's all about vertical and horizontal coordination, and it's all about vertical and horizontal cooperation. I have served on 3 judicial commissions on environment, and the summary of our finding is that many of the departments and ministries, they are doing certain good things without knowing that they are doing it for climate change. So for example, when Agriculture Extension Department, if they are writing sowing of wheat or sowing of rice should be completed by such and such date. So they are taking changing climate and changing weather patterns in mind. But if we don't know that we are doing it for climate change, we cannot attribute to it in our national determined contributions. So in the Judicial Commission by Lahore High Court on Punjab Environment, we actually numbered around 27 ministries and departments that need to talk to each other if Punjab government has to follow the climate change policy framework. We have agriculture department, we have irrigation department, we have food department, we have forestry and wildlife, we have planning and development division, we have finance, we have urban development, we have National Disaster Management Authority, we have Provincial Disaster Management Authority. So you keep on thinking of the departments and the ministries, both in province and in federal government, that need to talk to each other just on one simple agenda, that they need to implement this climate change policy framework. So if we're talking of a green economy, or if we're talking of building forward better, it means that it's about horizontal and vertical coordination. It's about breaking silos, talking to each other, and having this one common agenda point with us, that we have to decarbonize our societies, our economy, and our houses. And that would take us to carbon net zero emission, where whatever we emit through our activities, we will offset through our positive activities.
Any other questions or comments? Yo, piche.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferry, for updating about the COP26. I have a question, as you mentioned.
Sir, if I can also know your name and department, that would help me in contextualizing your question.
Yes, please. This is Dr. Shahid from Technology Department. So I have a question, as you mentioned in like the discussion in the COP26 about the maximum emission of CO2 of ratios are from the China and India and Russia and so on. Is there any analysis available in relation to the formulation of the CO2? Because as per my knowledge, and as I know that like every human being is in our exhale breath is 4.5% CO2, that is around more than 40,000 ppm. So as the population is increasing, so we also need the resources like food security and these all the foods required like the multiple vertebrates and so on. So these all the things are interlinked. So the second thing is that I think so the important thing is we can recycle the CO2. So that's what I think. So the Pakistan is playing a little bit role in this managing the CO2 by this killing Pakistan by a billion trees, like plantation. So I have also like a comment. I need a comment about the population relationship with this CO2, because the China population right now is 1.4 billion. and then followed by the India, and then so forth. So if we calculating this one, this is also.
Yes, am I audible?
Sorry.
Yes. Well, I think the per capita emission concept is very much there, but then one needs to see that per capita emission, carbon emission, when we think of it, the 1/3 of humanity lives in this part of the world that we call South Asia and China. Now, if we keep on the two countries, they keep on emitting as they have been emitting, they are not only jeopardizing the population in the countries in like Pakistan, Bhutan, Maldives, but also rest of the globe. And that's why I hinted towards this carbon credit mechanism. I think it would be quite important for us to negotiate with China. China is the largest emitter and our geostrategic partner as well, that some of the carbon credits through our billion tree plantation campaigns or other, if we can sell our carbon credits to China, that would be a win-win situation, both for China as well as for Pakistan. But as they say that money is yours, but resource don't belong to you. I think that we need to have this paradigm shift, especially in countries like China and Russia and America. Even if they have money to buy carbon credit, they cannot keep on growing the way they are growing economic development pursuit, because it is at the end putting whole of humanity in risk. So this is my comment on your comment that you have given.
Thank you, Dr. Abiswari. I am Dr. Zain from the Body Department, Associate Professor. I just recently read of your article, which is recently circulated by Faisalabad, in which Pakistan has signed particularly for illegal deforestation and to reduce emissions, methane emissions. I would like to know, are we have some policies at government levels so that we can regularize the carbon dioxide emissions through industries? Is there any some carbon capture mechanisms? Like in there are countries, I have seen there are some sort of carbon capture mechanisms which capture the excessive amount of carbon dioxide and clean the environment. Do you have some sort of ideas or implementations and policies in Pakistan?
Well, in case of Pakistan, there is no dearth of policies. We have excellent policies on almost everything, including the areas that you are mentioning. It's about the technical capacity and political will to implement those policies. Now, we have a policy, for example, that motor vehicles emitting more than a certain threshold, they shouldn't be allowed to ply on the road. But of course, due to lack of capacity, due to lack of political will, and due to lack of finances with the provincial governments who have to implement those policies, or lack of priority, you can say, finances are there. Those policies, those are not actually getting implemented. Now, the pledge for methane gas reduction, that I think is quite doable. If we look at the historical share of hydel power in our energy mix before we shifted towards coal, it was almost 1/3, 33%. Now it's matter of building another dam, and if there is a dam that you can build, you can easily get the share of renewable energy increased by 10 to 15%, and you can reduce the share of fossil fuel. Similarly, with this solar energy, and one hopes that with the improved technology, it would become even cheaper to adopt it. So with the solar energy techniques, by 2030, we will be able to again add maybe another 10 to 15% in our energy mix. Now, that would actually able to help us towards meeting our pledge of reducing methane gas emission. But finally, I would say that perhaps it would not be the government's policies. It would be the cost of fossil fuel energy that would force us to shift towards renewable energy. So the way the electricity bills and gas bills, those are getting increased, that would automatically compel consumers, all the consumer who can afford it, to start shifting towards solar, because energy would be fossil fuel energy. It would be simply too costly and too expensive to be used. So all of these things, I can see some ray of hope at the end of tunnel that we will go towards clean energy due to these different factors that I've shared with you.
I am Dr. Yasir Jamil from Department of Physics. I have a comment and a question. The comment is about that you have rightly said that we need both vertical and horizontal approaches for cope with the climate change problems. I want to share something that the most recent Nobel Prize in Physics has been awarded to the scientists who have worked in the area of climate change. They have analyzed the effect of human activities on the climate change and nonlinear equations that control these systems. And my question is about the target about no CO2 emission target that China has set it for 2060, I think, and India has set it as 2070. Is there a no CO2 emission target set by Pakistan? And is there also a global no CO2 emission target also? Thank you.
Almost all the countries, they have set their net zero emission. Net zero emission is that whatever carbon dioxide we would emit, we would be able to offset it with our pro-environment and pro-climate initiatives. Pakistan has also set a target, but our target is, as I said, NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution. Those are linked with provision of climate financing funds. So if the climate financing funds are there, then of course we can adopt achieve that milestone. India's target and China's target, those are important because they are the largest contributors. China, as I told you, is more than 25% global carbon dioxide emission. India is more than 13% carbon dioxide emission. So it's important for them to achieve net zero by all the Western countries. They have 2050 target set for them. China has got 2060. India has got 2070. For countries like Pakistan, we are neither here nor there. So it's 1%, less than 1% contribution. So even if we achieve it maybe next year, the total rest of the global emission, that would still be very much there, 99%. So the focus is on these biggest emitters. For us, we have given a very ambitious NDC, and we have linked it with climate finance. If that climate finance comes through, which is of course a utopian desire, if all of it comes through, then we can also achieve net zero emission by 2050 to 2060. But if it doesn't come, then we'll keep on doing it. But as I said, that our share is negligible.
Please go.
Dr. Abed, Dr. Wasim from Entomology Department. My question is that when we talk about the climate change, one of the most important, but particularly with Pakistan, is that solid waste. We are producing tons of solid waste. Unfortunately, there are no established landfill areas where that can be ultimately disposed of. And the other important thing is that last month I was there in Alam and I went to Mahudan Lake. I was really shocked to see that there were plenty of trees that were being cut on daily basis and just thrown in the river, and they were floating back down, and people were ultimately taking those. So these are the key issues with particularly when we talk about the climate change and the environmental change in Pakistan. In case this solid waste is not managed, I'm really afraid that we won't even find place to breathe. If you talk about Singapore on a daily basis is producing 6,000 to 7,000 metric tons of solid waste. And that is being utilized for the generation of electricity in the streets. And if we talk about Islamabad, Islamabad is producing 600 to 700 tons of solid waste. But unfortunately, that is all being thrown on the IGP road or areas close to that vicinity. So this is my question is that these are the key issues that really need to be addressed on top of this. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Very pertinent point. I think one of the advantages that we can get by joining this methane reduction alliance, that we will be able to get some sort of not only technical know-how and technical capacity, but also some finances in order to improve our solid waste management. As you know that one of the major source of methane in Pakistan is our garbage dumps. Of course, agriculture and especially rice is still another one, and the use of LNG and CNG and natural gas, that is the third one. So I'm quite hopeful that with this methane gas reduction alliance, Pakistan would be able to get something in return, and that would be that can be spent on solid waste management and garbage management to reduce methane emission.
मेरा नाम है, I'm from veterinary science brigade. So मेरा question है कि in CPAC, is there any point under consideration about the emission of these toxic gases?
Can you speak loud, please? I can't hear it. Babar, perhaps then you can
My name is
pose that question again.
My name is Faradina. I'm from veterinary science. My question is that in the CPAC, there is more industries and agriculture production from the side of Pakistan. And definitely there will be more gas emissions and toxic gases. And our public or our population will be at risk, definitely. Is there any sort of modality or climate finance fund like things among these two countries? Because China is benefiting from our areas, so emissions will be definitely there. Is there any type of modality between these two countries, how to compensate Pakistan? Is that?
Ji, Babar, can you ask this question?
Yeah, so I can. So her question is that in CPAC, a lot of industry is going to be installed, and she is talking, is there any provision of this climate-related issues on these all emissions? So is there any provision in CPAC regarding this emission and climate change-related matters?
Yes, thank you, Babar. First thing first, to me, CPAC is still a non-starter. We have the infrastructure and roads, we have Gwadar Port, but most of the much talked of industries which were to be installed under CPAC, I don't see them here in at least in near future. The second thing is, last year I couldn't mention it in my introductory remarks. Paris Agreement, it got a major jolt when Donald Trump, he withdrew from UNFCCC. So he withdrew United States from UNFCCC, and that actually provided an excellent opportunity for China to take a lead on climate change and take a lead on green and clean recovery and green and clean growth. And that's why for the first time when Donald Trump, he withdrew from the Paris Accord, China started saying clean and green economic growth and Belt and Road Initiative, clean and green Belt and Road Initiative. So China is very much pro-environment now. China has done a wonder cleaning the air quality of Beijing, cleaning the air quality of Shanghai. China is investing in solar technology, and that's why it is becoming more popular in Pakistan. I can share you that China is already working on the next generation solar panels, and the next generation solar panels are it would be for vertical buildings. So the paint that we will do on buildings, on the vertical buildings, this color paint would have solar cells in it, and those would absorb the solar energy, and they would convert it into electricity. So for all the condominiums and all the flats and all the high-rise buildings, this is the technology China is working upon. It's up to us now how better we can negotiate with China. At that time, when the CPAC was initially negotiated, Pakistan was an electricity-thirsty country, and the quickest and easiest way to have electricity in Pakistan at that time was coal-based power plants that China installed. But now that we have abundant generation capacity and the technology, especially solar technology, it has become more advanced and more cheaper, Pakistan can always negotiate with China for this sort of technology, and that can in turn clean and green CPEC. But as I said, that I don't see CPEC industry coming in Pakistan in near future.
Please go ahead.
My name is Faisalabad Hassan. I am from the Faculty of Social Sciences. My comment is, if we look at the Karachi, it was a beautiful city at time, or Lahore was the beautiful city, a city of gardens. Now they both are the city of Kachra Police. When our population is increasing and increasing so rapidly, and at the same time, the standard of living of the people is increasing all over the world, how we can expect that over time, this climate change or this pollution levels, they can be reduced?
I think the answer to this question is lies in sustainable consumption and production. Of course, we will have to meet the need of growing population. That is very much there. But then it's up to us how we can think of changing our not only production patterns, but also our consumption patterns. And this is what was discussed a few months ago under this Food System Summit. So as you know that now the world is moving beyond food security, and now they are talking of a food system. So replacing and changing and reforming the whole food chain and the food system from field to fork, so that it is more green, it's more sustainable, and it's more durable. So only by adopting to those practices, we can cope with the challenge of climate change and pollution amidst growing population. I don't see any other way of doing it.
Those alternate techniques, they again have a cost, and the developing countries like Pakistan, how they will take bear those costs. And in your comments, you have said that somewhere is a justice, climate justice. When on the one side, the polluters are the rich countries, they are the developed countries, they are the most powerful countries. And the effective one are the poor countries. How you can expect that there will be a justice in the world, where already we have never seen a justice anywhere in the world. It is the rule of jungle everywhere.
Well, I'm not that disappointed. I think that justice would automatically come, not because there would be a change of heart in developed world, because this would threaten their own existence. COVID is an excellent example. In COVID, why all of us, we take equally good care of our domestic service provider as we do for ourselves, because we know that anyone in the household, if he or she got COVID, that would directly impact our own family member, our own existence. So similarly, even if there is no climate justice, the rest of the world and the globe, they know, for example, if all the Himalayan glaciers they melt, so what would happen? This glacier melt, it would not stay only in India and Nepal and Pakistan. That would increase the sea level rise all over world, and that would directly challenge the development in rest of the world as well. Similarly, ozone layer depletion, even if it happens due to Pakistan's activity or due to Russia or America's activity, it would have an equal impact on whole of the globe. So the point that I'm trying to make that this sort of climate justice that would come not due to the fact that there is a political will to do it, but it would come due to the fact that there is no other alternative, and COVID has taught us very well. If COVID was a black swan that caught us while we were unprepared, climate change is a gray rhino that is running toward us very furiously. And if we are not united in combating climate change, all of us would have to suffer.
Question is, developed countries have used their, say, fossil fuels, their coal reserves, and the countries, developing countries like Pakistan, is still developing its, say, coal mines. How on the one hand, they are imposing that we should now produce clean energy. Where underdeveloped countries like Pakistan or developing countries like Pakistan will move. On the other hand, say that China is shifting its coal plant from China to Pakistan. And they are emphasizing on the other hand that we should use clean energy in the production processes. They are also shifting their production units to the developing countries so that whatever the pollution takes place, it takes place in the developing countries, poor countries. In the name of we are developing your capacity, we are utilizing your labor, we are utilizing your other resources, raw material, but the ultimate objective behind it, ultimately the source of pollution will be shifted to the other.
Babar, can you provide me a summary of this question, please? It was a lot of echo.
Yeah, his question is that the developed countries, they have almost utilized their fossil fuel sources, and now developing countries, they are trying to explore or using this fossil fuel. So how, and then second part of his question is that, for example, China, they have shifted their industries in most of the developing countries in the name that China is helping these countries for their development. Similarly, China has shifted their coal in the Pakistan. So his question is that how it is justifiable that these developed countries, they are shifting their industries to developing countries to clean their own environment, and environment of developing countries is polluted.
Babar, there are a couple of things that perhaps you would have to keep in mind. Even today, 60% of China's energy is coming from coal. And it is for the first time that China is facing power outage after a long time when coal prices started increasing. So although developed countries, including China, which is not so developed, they are shifting their industries to countries like Pakistan. That's where climate financing that matters, and that's where the transfer of technology it matters, and that's where adaptation fund and mitigation fund it matters. So the countries like Pakistan, while we would like to receive foreign investment, while we would like to get industrialized, we will also like to get the new technology for doing things, and we will also like to receive those climate finance funds so that we can compensate for it. The positive development in it is that America and China, they are very closely working on carbon capture and storage. This is a technology that Israel only last week, they very successfully made some progress on it. The theory is that you release certain balloons in the atmosphere, which would capture CO2 from atmosphere, and that would reduce the concentration of CO2 from the atmosphere. So while I don't see complete phasing out of coal or complete phasing out of fossil fuels within next 3 to 4 decades, I can see that many of such technologies, they would be available by which we will be able to reduce our carbon concentration. So it's a multifaceted, multi-front discussion and multifaceted, multi-front fight against climate change that the countries are fighting in their own ways. So on one hand, this improvement of technology, advancement of technology, and on the other hand, penalizing the use of fossil fuel and providing funds to the developing countries who are still using fossil fuel for their adaptation and mitigation.
So this is Siddharth from Michael Forum. It's very nice presentation and discussion. I'd like to add 2 things into your discussion. One thing which is very pertinent, that when we burn this methane, it will become carbon dioxide, and that will become much more lethal. There is one industry called as dairy industry of Pakistan, where you know that almost 40% of methane is being released by the cattle farming. And anything that we have to contain it to a certain level. And the second part is that we need to, you can say, evolve a method for carbon pricing. Because without this carbon pricing, we may not be able to find out where we are standing now and where we have to achieve, which kind of goals we need to achieve over the time.
Babar, I again need some summary from you.
Yeah, so the question from Dr. Sujat from Microbiology Department is that the methane burning release a lot of carbon dioxide, and dairy industry release about 40% of total methane. So it is one of the highest source of methane gas, carbon dioxide gas emission. So how to curtail this? Is there any option in this international scenario? And second question was about that this carbon financing related thing.
And second was on carbon.
So is there any mechanism that carbon pricing can be used to curtail this methane gas emission?
Yes, thank you, Babar. I think it's a very relevant and very pertinent question, especially sitting in Agriculture University, Faisalabad. I think that's where agriculture scientists, their role becomes extremely important. Carbon credit market is, of course, there. That would be, we will be able to sell any technology that can offset carbon dioxide emission to the rest of the world, any initiative, any technology. But then those technologies and those initiatives have to come from our scientist community. One way of curbing the methane gas emission in West from dairy sector is improving the productivity per animal. So they are actually trying to improve the productivity of animals. So instead of having 10 cows for X liter of milk or X kilos of meat, they can get from less number of cows. But this is only one of the proposed methods which is being used there. In our case, of course, if we have committed to that pledge, we need to think of some doable, feasible, and pragmatic technologies, some changes in agronomic production techniques, some changes in our animal husbandry techniques that can reduce this methane gas emission. And that's where the scientists sitting in Agriculture University, they can play a very important role.
I am Dr. Anjum, Department of Energy System Engineering, Engineering Faculty, UF. Sir, I have one question and comment that university has planned to install a 2 megawatt system in our rooftop of the main buildings, but we have been facing problem regarding net metering. On one side, we have a slogan of clean and green Pakistan, but the discos and NEPRAs are not encouraging the installation of net metering. And I tell you, without net metering, the solar system cannot be installed. Have a look on these figures. The China is number 1. The installed capacity is 254 megawatts. This is on net metering. Number 2 country in the world is USA, 152 megawatts, and then Germany 49,000 megawatt, and 4th number is India, 41 megawatt. And our installed capacity is only 1700 megawatts, only 1700. And when you compare with India, even 49,000 megawatts. This is all on net metering. I have one concern and question that why our NEPRA and DISCOs are not encouraging net metering. University has planned and we are committed to install the system. We are stuck due to net metering problem, because when our generation is more, to where we to supply the extra load? We have installed capacity 4.6 megawatt on our rooftop, but now we are facing maybe 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt. A month, 2 weeks ago, our team visited UIT Lahore, where all engineers are sitting, and their vice chancellor is also engineer, and they are not able to install a single meter on 1 megawatt system. And if we are claiming the clean and green Pakistan and we are talking about climate change, then I think that these technologies should be promoted so that, and at the moment we have been facing problem. Energy deficit country we are 5,600 megawatts. the shortfall. And I think if NEPRA and ISPOs allow this deficit can be made up very soon. So I have one comment and request that this vice may be put in the higher forum so that we can install this type of system in all universities and public sector building, and other countries have reached very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, very important question. I can give you two answers to it. The first answer is about the gradual expansion of net meters. In Islamabad, it's already available. In most parts of Lahore, it's already available. Even in Karachi, it's available. In rest of the discos, they're gradually introducing it. But I have noted it down that Faisalabad University actually wants to provide it to FESCO, and I can talk to Energy Minister in our next economic advisory group meeting. That was my official response. The unofficial response is about political economy of it. And the political economy is that we are stuck with these capacity payment charges. Now, the problem is, even if you want to produce off-grid electricity, the industrialists, they have their off-grid generation capacities. If you have your solar capacities, what would we do with the IPPs with whom we have already made those commitments? Either we will buy X number of units from them, or we will pay them the cost of electricity. So right now, government of Pakistan is trying to actually consume maximum electricity so that instead of giving money to independent power generators for not using it, we can provide some sort of relief to the customers. And that's why during winter, there is this offer that if your electricity bill is higher than your previous year's electricity unit consumption, you will get a subsidized rate for it. That would reduce our dependency on gas for heating, and that would reduce our capacity payment charges that we have to pay to the independent power plant generators. So this is the political economy of your question. That's why many of the initiatives by which we can actually switch to renewable, we can't adopt them because we are locked in these very expensive energy agreements that would keep on haunting us for at least another 5 to 10 years.
Any other question? Okay, I think this has been a very comprehensive review of climate change within the scope of COP26. Very soon we will have a similar session on water, and I've already requested a group of faculty here to prepare a water debate agenda, and we will invite the authors of federal water policy to debate on water. But for now, I think Dr. Slary has avoided talking about water, but there is a nexus between climate, water, and security. Today, the focus has been made on generation and carbon credit, which is very important. And that's a very good example of food for thought. But this, thank you, Dr. Slary, and we have tremendously benefited from your presentation and experience that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Pleasure was mine. I love to interact with the faculty members again on issues of economy and inflation, and to pick your brain on how to address some of these things at federal level.
Well, you know, if you can get us net meters.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You know, talk to the power minister why they are not allowing net metering.
Yes, that's what I'll talk to Hamada sir.
Yeah.
And I'll get back to you.
Please do so.
Sure.
It's a project by the name of PICA. That PICA is basically a platform that has been created to allow for solar energy projects in the academic institution. And some of the universities have installed. We also have a small one already installed. But this seems to be a bit older. by way of getting benefit of this facility which government created. So we are worried because it's going to be closed down in 2022. So next year, if we don't avail it, then PICA facility will be no more available. And this net metering seems to be very illogical for not having been allowed. Because there is, we are asking for carbon credit, we are not, why we are not asking for solar credit? This is a solar credit which is coming for free. So please do talk about this to be part of concern.
Definitely. I'll talk to Ahmad Azhar as well as the Secretary Power. Thank you.
See you. See you soon.
Okay. Khuda Hafiz.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have benefited tremendously from two presentations today. Tomorrow again we will have a session which will be the concluding day of this week's capacity building and development process. Tomorrow we have one guest speaker and then we have about 3 more speakers.
Yes, we are short presentation.
Quality enhancement, endowment fund. No, it's not endowment. It's financial aid. Financial aid and it's good. There will be the presentations tomorrow, and then we will have a presentation on economics and higher education by Dr. Nadeem. As I indicated yesterday, today I would like to again inform you that at the end of this 5 days exercise, we should come up with this SWOT analysis. And that SWOT analysis first must revolve around our own institution, institutional capacities, institutional challenges, opportunities. In that direction, as a higher education institution, what are our major strengths and weaknesses and opportunities, threats, and then within the higher education system in the country, number of universities, campuses, specialized universities, general universities. And then we also need to understand that how far our current system is going to remain sustainable and capable of delivering. You know, every year we get 2,000 extra students. The system is already overstretched. So is it time to freeze it? And if we freeze it, would we still sustain the budget challenge? And in terms of human resource, not only capacity development, but also how do we deal with the production of fresh young faculty and then making the system available for them to pursue their scholarship as academics as well as solution providers. So tomorrow, I would like to see that get the best possible input to plan for a better University of Agriculture Faisalabad down the road in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. And thereby meeting up to our expectations as a public institution. तो ये मुझे आज एक मैसेज किया साहब ने बैठे थे कि वो कहते हैं जी कि असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर कि आप शॉर्ट लिस्टिंग क्यों करना चाहते हैं। हमने असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर टीटीएस की पोस्ट एडवर्टाइज की और हमारे पास 350 से ज़्यादा एप्लीकेशन है और हम सबको पता है रिसेंटली हम तो कह रहे प्रॉपर टीटीएस जॉब ऑफर करेंगे। हमारे एजुकेशन कमीशन ने आईपीएफपी के लिए 1000+ लोगों को फिल्टर किया और उसमें 120 बंदे पास हुए। तो ये हम 350 बंदे को क्यों ना फिल्टर करें? एक तो ये लॉजिकल क्वेश्चन है और दूसरा ये है हमें ये भी देखना है कि क्या 350 बंदा जो है उसको आप इंटरव्यू प्रोसेस से फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट कर सकते हैं 15-20 मिनट के इंटरव्यू से। ऐसे कहीं नहीं होता दुनिया में। बात ट्रैक अपॉइंटमेंट्स के लिए एप्लीकेशन आती है, शॉर्ट लिस्ट हो के 3-4-5 बंदों को 2-3 दिन के लिए इंटरव्यू किया जाता है, फिर उनको जॉब ऑफर की जाती है। तो ये मेरे ख्याल में और आप भी बात कर सकते हैं Syndicate is the rule-making authority, and on the recommendation of syndicate, on the recommendation of selection board, syndicate has decided that the shortlisting shall take place whenever we have more than 10 applications in any given advertisement for a given subject or field of specialization. नहीं हम लेक्चर की पहले करते हैं हमने शायद सिस्टम फैसले की नहीं थी ये सही है लेकिन जब आपके पास एप्लीकेंट्स अप्रूव्ड है it's always good to use some filters to bring up the best possible. अब वो उसमें हमारे दोस्त ने ये लफ्ज़ ये यूज किया कि इंटेलेक्चुअल्स को शॉर्ट लिस्टिंग करने की जरूरत नहीं है उन्होंने लफ्ज़ इंटेलेक्चुअल यूज किया तो मैं पता करना चाहता हूँ कि इंटेलेक्चुअल जो है वो टेस्ट ऑफ इंटेलेक्चुअलिटी क्यों नहीं फेस करना चाहते. This would be some kind of test of logic, communication, language proficiency, or some basics in any given subject. So, मेरे पास और भी लोग आ रहे हैं, पता नहीं लोग टेस्ट क्यों कर रहे हैं. It's not a test to exclude people, but it's a test to rank them. And there is every reason to rank people. दूसरी रैंकिंग ये है कि वो एक्सपीरियंस के साथ होती है कि फ्रेश इंडक्शन में वो मुमकिन नहीं है जो उनकी वो कैरियर की प्रोफाइलिंग करते हैं तो ये फ्रेश इंडक्शन है इसमें कैरियर की प्रोफाइलिंग कोई खास अपॉर्चुनिटी है नहीं हमारे पास इसलिए ये हम फिल्टर लगाना चाहते हैं और अकॉर्डिंग टू द रूल्स नथिंग अगेंस्ट द रूल्स. जी ये मेरे पास आज और इस तरह के सब दिन चल रहा है कि क्वेश्चन होंगे तो कुछ लोगों की इस तरह की रिजर्वेशन मेरे पास आ रही थी तो मैंने सोचा कि मैं ये आपके सामने रख दूं अगर इसके ऊपर आप कमेंट करना चाहते हैं प्लीज फील फ्री टू कमेंट.
Recently, मुल्तान में
अच्छी हमारे सिंडिकेट रूट लेके गाड़ियां सिंडिकेट ने हमने सिंडिकेट से पहले एक फेडरेशन हो गई पिछले सेकंड बोर्ड में वो 4 पोजीशन थी कैप्टन स्टार की और सेकंड बोर्ड रिफ्यूज टू इंटरव्यू देम उन्होंने 45 नंबर इंटरव्यू क्यों करें आप इनको फिल्टर करें हमारे पास 10 कैंडिडेट थे फिर हमने उन्हें कहा कि 5 जो है एक पोजीशन के लिए पहले से नॉर्म है उन्होंने कहा चले हम 20 पे हैं आगे तो बढ़ाए ना. Any other questions, comments? Well, I hope that we will continue with this. ये इधर से कुछ कहना चाहते हैं तुम आप कुछ कहना चाह रही हो ये दे उधर तो माइक दें.
सर मेरा नाम सायरा है और डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ ह्यूमैनिटीज एंड लिंग्विस्टिक्स से मेरा ताल्लुक है. सर मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि हमने प्रॉब्लम को तो डिस्कस कर लिया जैसे क्लाइमेट चेंज है पूरी दुनिया इसको फेस कर रही है लेकिन हमने सजेशंस पे बात नहीं की और वे फॉरवर्ड पे बात नहीं की. लाइक अगर हम यहाँ से इससे कुछ सजेशंस के बारे में बात करते हैं कुछ इस तरह से सीखते हैं क्योंकि बीइंग अ टीचर हम क्लास में 60-70 या 100 बच्चों को इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहे होते हैं तो अगर 60 या 70 या 100 की क्लास में से 10 बच्चे भी हमसे कुछ सीख के उस पर अमल करते हैं तो हमारे लिए बड़ी अचीवमेंट होती है. तो मैं ये कहना चाहती थी कि हम ये जो क्लाइमेट चेंज पर अगर हमने पूरी बात की है तो उसमें बड़े अच्छे सवाल भी हुए हैं और एक डिस्कशन रही है लेकिन ये फॉरवर्ड हमने डिस्कस नहीं किया कि किस तरह से उसको प्रूव कर सकते हैं बीइंग एन इंडिविजुअल और बीइंग अ टीचर हमारा क्या रोल होना चाहिए सोसाइटी
में. हम यहाँ पे अटेम्प्ट कर रहे हैं डिबेट करवाने की. एक डिबेट हुई है और उसमें कोई ना कोई टेक होम मैसेजेस होंगे. हमने आज कोई अल्टीमेट फैसला नहीं किया कि क्लाइमेट चेंज जो है वो कल से ठीक होना शुरू होता है लेकिन बिटवीन द लाइन आई थिंक मैनी डिस्कशन पॉइंट्स फॉर वैलिड. वो बिलियन ट्री सुनामी की बात हुई वो कार्बन न्यूट्रल इकोनॉमी की बात हुई सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट की बात हुई है और कार्बन ये जो है अभी बात हुई है नेट मीटरिंग की इंस्टेड ऑफ फॉसिल फ्यूल और कार्बन ड्रिवन एनर्जी वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट सोलर सोल्यूशन व्हिच इज नॉट कार्बन ड्रिवन. तो जैसा कि मैंने कहा कि हमने कोई अल्टीमेट कोई टच बटन सोल्यूशन जो है वो ढूंढने की तलाश में नहीं है हम लेकिन हम डिबेट करवा रहे हैं. तो सोसाइटीज जो हैं सोशली, कल्चरली, इकोनॉमिकली ग्रो करती हैं डिबेट्स। आपने ठीक कहा कि आप 60-70 की क्लास में बैठते हैं तो अगर 10 बंदे आपने इन्फ्लुएंस कर दिए तो ये बहुत बड़ी अचीवमेंट है। और मैं 300-400 बंदे की क्लास रोज देता हूँ, अल्लाह करे में भी 10 बंदे जी थैंक यू। ये देखिए, ये मैंने लाइटर कहा है, 10 लीडर बहुत होते हैं। अगर यहाँ 10 लीडर हमने पैदा कर दिए ना, 10 जैसे मतलब 10 नए बादशाह से पैदा तो यहीं से आएगा, यहीं से डील बनेंगे, भाई चांस बनेंगे। इस वक्त 13 बादशाह ना यूएसए वेरी करते फैसलाबाद के 13 इस वक्त, पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी के भी 13 नहीं है। दैट इज बिकॉज वो फ्लैट साहब जो कह रहे थे, हम बंदों को बड़ी ब्रॉड फाउंडेशन देते हैं यहाँ पे, वो सारी उम्र लर्न करता है और उसको फाउंडेशन को उसको कहीं ना कहीं फायदा होता है। एंड दैट्स विजिबल, ये मैंने आपके सामने स्टैट रखी है। और ये जो बंदे जिन्होंने वो नए एचएससी के अंडर ग्रेजुएट डिग्री के प्रोग्राम को डिनाई कर रहे हैं, कॉमन एडमिशन को डिनाई कर रहे हैं, वो एक्चुअली ब्रॉडर फाउंडेशन को डिनाई कर रहे हैं। कल डिबेट में सूट में ये लेके आए कि भाई आप क्यों करना चाहते हैं। ये तो मान लिया कि वेटरनरी स्ट्रीम इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम इंजीनियरिंग स्ट्रीम। कहते हैं कि वेटरनरी और इंजीनियरिंग स्ट्रीम का वो कॉमन एडमिशन में नहीं आ सकती। मुझे बताएं फूड या वो एग्रीकल्चर से कैसे डिफरेंट है? व्हाट्सएप का डिपेंड कर रहा है, ठीक है। और मुझे बताएं कि माइक्रोबायोलॉजी क्यों नहीं लिंक फील्ड एग्रीकल्चर का और वेटरनरी साइंस का दोनों, ठीक है। और मुझे बताएं कि कौन सा ऐसा फील्ड है या बायोलॉजिकल इंजीनियरिंग या एग्रीकल्चर साइंस का जिसको इकोनॉमिक्स नो हो नहीं होनी चाहिए। सबको होनी चाहिए, सोशल साइंस का एक्सपोजर होना चाहिए। तो ये जो हमारी टनल रीजन है, टनल इकट्ठी होती जा रही, सालों मोटे होते जा रहे हैं, सालों बंद होते जा रहे हैं, इसको तोड़ने के लिए सोचे। जी एनी अदर कमेंट्स? जी प्लीज।
जी सर, ये बच्ची ने बात की है कि हमने उसमें सीखा नहीं है कार्बन एमिशन के बारे में, तो उन्होंने बताया था कार्बन कैप्चरिंग का वो टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप हो रही है। और दूसरा ये दो है, एक आप एनवायरमेंट से कार्बन कैप्चर कर लिए कि एमिशन ना होने में, तो उसमें नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी जो है वो बहुत इफेक्टिवली एफिशिएंटली यूज हो रही है ये मीथेन को रिड्यूस करने में। ये जो डेयरी हाउसेस है इनमें और जितनी भी आपकी पोल्ट्री हाउसेस है तो वहाँ पे ये यूज हो रही है।
आपने एक और बात किसी ने भी लिखी, जितनी बड़ी डेयरी ऑफेंडर है उतना ही बड़ा मर्डर राइस ऑफेंडर है इस मुल्क में। एंड वी टेक लॉट ऑफ प्राइड कि हम राइस $2 का एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, हम कभी उसका वाटर बजट भी डिस्कस करते हैं और उसका कार्बन बजट भी डिस्कस करते हैं। ये राइस जो हम एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं इसकी यकीनन नेगेटिव इकोनॉमी है, ये इंडिविजुअल को फायदा है in terms of economic terms of society as well as country. The rice is something which deserves to be curtailed. Buttered rice भी उतना ही बड़ा ऑफेंडर है जितनी बड़ी लाइवस्टॉक की एक्सक्रीटा है। ओके, आई थिंक हमने आज जल्दी काम खत्म कर लिया। अब आप कुछ बताना चाहेंगे? कल वाइंड अप हो रहा है ये राउंड, देखिए ये राउंड फिर आएगा इंशाल्लाह, हम फिर करेंगे राउंड विद न्यू आइडियाज, विद न्यू स्पीकर्स और जारी रहेगा।
थैंक यू वेरी मच। तो सर ने बता दी है कल का सेशन बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है और इंटरेक्टिव सेशन, इसमें आप सबके इनपुट बहुत जरूरी है, इसलिए प्लीज जरा टाइम पे कोशिश करें और आगे बैठकर एवरीबॉडी शुड गिव देयर इनपुट। नाउ टी इज रेडी इन फ्रंट ऑफ द